Welcome to Section 4, Configuration as Code and Container Orchestration. In this video, we'll get a lay of the land as it pertains to the section. What is configuration as code, or is often abbreviated as a capital C, lowercase a, and capital C? The concept is as it sounds. It's a paradigm where configuration of infrastructure and services is done with code rather than through a console or with one-off commands. Imagine a new application is going to launch, and you are tasked with configuring networking and VMs for the deployment, QA, staging, and production environments. The traditional way of doing this is to log on to the network interface and make changes. Then for each VM, log on and set up usernames, groups, permissions, install dependencies, install monitoring software, open ports, etc. Later, the development team comes to you and says they need port 5984 open instead of 5983. And Node 8.2 installed instead of 8.1. So you repeat the process of making changes for each, but in order to make those changes work, then other changes needed to take place for whatever reason. Now the development team comes to you again and says they made a mistake and need to go back to the prior configuration. So what has to happen? You guessed it, same thing as before. Then later in the week, the development team needs more changes, but you are off that day. They want to try and use the updated configuration again, but they only know that port 5984 needs to be open and that Node 8.2 should be installed. Your associate is tasked with making the changes in your absence. The associate is willing, but has no idea what other configuration changes were needed to make those changes work. This is a contrived example, but similar issues happen often. What could have been done to help reduce the workload and to convey the needed information to peers? Enter configuration as code. Imagine the same scenario where a development team comes to you and asks that you configure networking and the environments for their new application stack. You then proceed to fulfill that request, but instead of working on each environment's console or command line, you write out the tasks in a file. Then when done with the file, you enter a command and fire off the configuration for each environment in parallel. You then commit the file to source control. Later, the development team needs to make those changes to the port and node version. So you enter a few changes in the task file and fire off the changes. Whoops, those changes are not going to work, so you are instructed to change it back. No problem since you stored the original task file in source control. So you branch the previous version, initiate the change, and commit the configuration back to source control. Now, the same scenario as before. Your associate is tasked with changing back to the newer configuration. This time, however, he can look at what is in source control to understand what took place, then branch, run, and commit the new state. Configuration as code is a paradigm in which configuration changes are preserved in code to provide traceability, repeatability, and automation. How can we accomplish this? This can be accomplished by producing a simple script using the likes of Bash, PowerShell, Python, Ruby, Perl, even the Azure templates we saw earlier. Now, I won't say that producing a script that does proper validation and checking is easy, but it can be done. However, this is where you may want to take advantage of one or more of the multiple tools that can help, such as Ansible, Chef, and Puppet, to name a few. These tools provide a system and framework to support CAC. There are also some other systems that can provide configuration as code. These systems may not be thought of as CAC tools because they reach beyond CAC and break what we traditionally think of as CAC tools, but they are. I'm talking about Docker and Kubernetes. While these aren't the only containerization and container orchestration tools, they are certainly the most popular and ones that you will be introduced to in this section.